we all ready?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the second season of the Life Story Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to 2022, episode 2, season 1. And in this 2022 season, we're trying something new to get started.
I think you said episode 2, season 1.
Okay. All right. Fine. I'll just let it be. All right. So in season 2, episode 1, we're going to start with something different. We're going to start with a poem that Nyasha wrote, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right, Nyasha, you ready?
Mm-hmm. Can I read the poem?
No, Nyasha's going to read her own poem. Then you're going to have a chance to focus on a part of the poem that you want to.
And I have a question.
Okay, Nyasha, take it away.
How do we stand back and watch them suffer? Arms over their heads, waiting for the bullets to fall and pierce their skin, stained dark as the hardened ground, and draw out the blood that will stain the earth with rusted puddles.
I had a question first.
Okay, looks like some of us have questions already.
Yeah, I have one.
Okay, before we jump into your questions, let's listen to Nyasha. She's the one who wrote the poem. Let's listen to what was going through her mind. What thoughts led to her writing this poem. Then we can ask questions after we kind of have an idea of what this poem means to her.
Well, my inspiration kind of came from reading a few books about terrorist groups in Africa. And I was wondering how I never knew this stuff had been going on before. And I was wondering how many people around the world were just as clueless as me. And so I wrote the poem.
To me, the interesting thing is that I didn't know that was the inspiration. I think like most people who are going to be listening to this episode, there's going to be people who are going to make assumptions until they hear what you have to say.
Do you have a terrorist group in particular that you remember reading about?
Yes. It was one from the book called Soldier Boy about a terrorist group in Uganda, I think. I don't remember its name, but it was led by Joseph Kony.
And the Lord's Resistance Army is what it's called. Do you remember about him? You can talk about him.
Well, yes. He was he made people believe that he was a prophet of God, and what he was doing was God's will. And what he did was go all around Uganda and maybe some countries around it and took children to join his army and had them kill people. And it was bad.
And they're called the boy soldiers.
Or the child soldiers.
Okay.
Soldier Boy is the, because I read that book too, and it's one I highly, highly recommend to any preteen and teen reader, although some parents may want to guide their children. You know your children and what they can handle. It's an excellent book. It's a story of two boys told in tandem. One is a child who is now grown and runs an organization trying to rescue current boys in the army. And then the other boy's story in tandem is a child that is in the process of being rescued after having been injured and then abandoned by Coney's army. So it is a very excellent book, and that is Stephanie's literary moment for the day.
So we're going to come back to you guys with your questions, but I still want to find out from Nyasha, when you were writing these lines, can you walk us through the lines? Like, what is the image here? What were you thinking? Like the first one says, how do we stand back? So I think I understand from what you're saying, like you were clueless. So when you found out, it's like, how can we just let this kind of stuff happen? But can you walk us through maybe some of the lines that you wrote and just talk about them? Like I said, some people are going to read this poem and they will have a completely different idea. But I want to know from your mind how you would explain some of these lines. Do you think we could be doing more? Like, how do we stand back and watch them suffer? Just talking about those young boys. In your mind, do you think if we knew, we would be doing more? We could be doing something?
I believe we could be doing something more.
And what would that something look like?
Well, if you could fund or help give money for this cause, if it was possible to do so, you could do it.
So the cause to get the boys out of the armies or something like that? Rescue some of those boys?
Or rehabilitate them. Because most of them have been
Scarred.
brainwashed and completely destroyed emotionally and physically. And it's not just boys. They kidnap girls too. They use the girls as prostitutes for the soldiers.
What are prostitutes?
Prostitutes are women that are forced to sleep with men that are not their husband or partner.
In this context, yes, they're like they take the young girls and give them to the soldiers as their wives, or
The higher ranking officials, actually.
maybe higher ranking officials. I don't know the particulars of the story. So again, the other line here, Nyasha, is the one that says arms over their heads. Is this because of something that the book describes the situation and you can visualize it? That there's some of them says arms over their heads, waiting for the bullets to fall and pierce their skin. Which part of this book kind of paints that picture for you?
Well, it didn't necessarily use those words, but I was using it to describe people who are helpless.
So
People who have nothing to defend themselves.
So young boys naturally fighting a war are going to die,
Well,
or the people that they're going to shoot at.
the people who are going to shoot at and their own families watching this happen. That happened to one of the boys, Ricky, in the story.
What happened to his family?
They weren't shot, but they were put into a hut and the hut was burned down and they were killed in that situation.
And I guess that would explain stained dark as the hardened ground, and draw out their blood that will stain the earth with rusted puddles. I'm just assuming these are puddles of blood, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But the stained dark as the hardened ground was actually me explaining what color their skin was.
Okay. So their skin gets stained with their blood?
No. Pierce their skin that is stained dark as the hardened ground. Because the bullets are going to fall and pierce their skin, which is stained as hard as the hardened ground.
Okay.
And draw out their blood that will then stain the earth in rusted puddles.
Okay. Well, that's why I love poetry, because if you don't read it right, you come out on the other end with a different idea than what the writer intended. Okay. I think Nyasha has explained it really, really well. So let's go to Tendekai's question.
The first one isn't really a question, but aren't some of the punishments cutting off of the nose and ears?
Well, you're talking about something you saw in the picture, that if people from Coney's army ran away, they could be punished. And one of those ways were cutting off ears and noses.
And fingers as well. Or death.
My real question was, why did you choose the words that will stain the earth with rusted puddles?
Well, because I wanted to explain that the blood would remain there, and it was maybe a sign.
It's called using figurative language or descriptive language.
Like describing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In poetry, you have usually, let me back up. In poetry, you often have less words to paint a vivid picture. There are ballads and very long form poetry, but in short poems, you need to use strong words that paint your picture. And that's what Nyasha has done here.
So she used the strong words so she didn't have to make it like one of those long poems.
Well, she used strong words and she didn't need to make it a long poem.
You could still use strong words and write a very long poem.
Yes.
That goes on fast.
We'll get into that in later episodes.
Oh dear.
I think Panache, did you have a question?
I did, but it was answered.
What was your question?
It was about what had inspired this thing, this poem.
Makanaga, did you have a question?
Well, when she was talking about the arms of their heads, it brought to mind part of the book where actually Ricky was captured because they were being beaten. In my mind, obviously they'd be trying to cover their heads so their heads don't get injured.
That bad?
They were injured badly in the first place.
You're just being controversial now. He says that bad, then they injured badly in the first place.
Well, they get injured worse throughout the story.
Okay.
That's enough.
So I'll tell you honestly what I was thinking when I read this poem. I thought you were writing because of the Black Lives Matter movement and all the stories surrounding it. And I thought you're talking about the police shooting black men in the streets and their blood staining
The roads.
the roads, yes. But
That's what a lot of people will think when they read this.
yeah, in a way, you can relate to that. But my biggest struggle thinking about what other people might think was going to be, people don't always know to separate things. Like there might be people who know the color of your skin, and they might think you only write this kind of substance because you're very passionate about the Black Lives Movement, and they'll tune you off or tune you out. But I like the lesson that I just learned here, that this horrific picture that Nyasha is describing here, when you really look at it, it should not be guided just by race or the color of people's skin. Because while I was over here in my brain thinking about the struggles of Black people in America, and I thought, this poem gets it so well. The same thing is true about the struggles of young boys and girls and their families all the way in Africa. And with the exception of the color of their skin, it could be true about anyone who is suffering and being killed because
they're different.
Yeah, because they're different, or someone
marginalized,
or someone is just abusing their power and ending someone's life.
Someone could read this poem and think about the conflicts between Palestinians and Israelis.
Yeah.
That's the thing with poetry. And when we try to interpret it, people are going to take whatever struggle they have experienced or whatever struggle they know about, even if they haven't experienced it, and they're going to apply it. And that's actually something that's really brilliant about poetry. But this can be applied to so many different conflicts.
Yeah, and like I said, even besides the race issue, it can be people, what is it, Ireland and Northern Ireland, the wars they had for so many years. You could still picture people being brought into an army or being made to choose sides and having to fight someone who could be their brother or destroy an entire village of people just like them. So yeah, I really think not just to heap a lot of praise on Nyasha, but this is really good. This is a really good mind opening and allows you to use your heart to apply it and find that place where Nyasha says we could do something about it. How come we don't know? Sometimes we just don't pay attention to the struggles of other people. And when we find out, we are dismayed, like, this has been going on for how long? All right, we'll take Panashe's question next.
Well, it wasn't a question.
Okay.
I think it covers both subjects. Yes, the terrorists and also the Black Lives Matter thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does. If you really put yourself in the place of other people's shoes, you can see this conflict playing out in many different parts of the world. Okay, we'll go to Tatenda.
When you made this poem, did you think about Zimbabwe?
Not necessarily.
So what about Zimbabwe, Tatenda?
Well, when I looked at my shirt, I saw the tag that said Zimbabwe.
So we'll come back to Tendekai. Try not to forget your question. Do you want to ask it first, and I'll come back to what I was going to say? What do you want to say? What you wanted to say first?
You can say.
No, go ahead. Say your piece first.
Actually, I have two questions. Who was the kid that had to watch his parents burn in a house?
Ricky
Iniwar.
Did he have to blow the house up or set it on fire?
No.
Another commander did it.
It was part of the torture to force these boys watch their families be destroyed. So they would do that to break these boys' minds down and maybe they would feel like they didn't, if they fought against, and they would end up like their family, or maybe they would feel like they had nothing to run away and try to go home for. There's lots of different things, but it was a way to start breaking these children down to destroy their family.
My second question was, why did you choose the words bullets to fall? Like, are they coming from the sky?
No, they're being shot from a gun.
Yes, but I was wondering if they're being shot up in the air.
Poetic language.
Figurative and descriptive.
Well, there is a way if people were flying a plane. Yeah, that's what I sort of thought about the first time I read this. A plane dropping bullets.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen that way too. Yes, and bullets have been known to fall from the sky.
If you shoot in the air.
Literally.
So did the first atomic bomb.
Okay. All right. Can I go back to my Zimbabwe part now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, speaking about Zimbabwe, for a long time, and I don't know how many years now, but before Zimbabwe got its independence in 1980, there was a lot of fighting. And the truth is, in that fighting, there were young boys and girls too who were made to fight. And they were taken from their homes. And for the most part, the way I understand it, they were used as messengers, right? So they would be the ones taking messages from one camp to another. Or they would be used as spies. So they would be used in the villages to kind of keep an eye out. When the British forces would be coming to a village, then they would go and tell the fighters, the comrades, or the guerrillas, as they were called. I think they might have been called terrorists even back then. That the British army was approaching, so the fighters would go hide or leave that town. But you will find that even though they were not supposed to be in part of the fighting, a lot of them at some point ended up having to pick up the guns and fight. And a lot of children did also die fighting for Zimbabwe's independence. I grew up in at a time when Zimbabwe was no longer Rhodesia. So it was a peaceful time. But I've heard the stories of children who were lost during the war. And I've heard some of my uncles and aunts tell me that they were called, I think, Mujiba or Chimbwedo. Those are the young boys and girls. And yeah, they played a role. And during war, we celebrate the victories, but it's such an ugly thing. But the one you're describing, is it Conies?
Conies. With an N.
Army? That one doesn't sound like an army that is out there trying to fight for anything good. The book, at least the way that you guys describe it to me.
Do you not know anything about Conies Lord Resistance Army?
I know about it because at one point there was a big YouTube event where people or some guy said he was going to find Connie because he thought he could go find him and expose him because I think whether he was one of the world's most wanted criminals or something like that. He wanted to go out there and find him and expose him and stop the fighting.
I think we need to assign Baba homework.
Was Soldier Boy a messenger and spy for the army?
No. Soldier Boy was stolen from his family. The name Soldier Boy is just the title given because a lot of these soldiers were boys. He was stolen from his family. His family was destroyed and he was forced to fight for Coney, even though he did not believe in Coney's cause. And eventually even led groups of soldiers himself as an experienced soldier.
And as these child soldiers went on, Mom said it this way before, that basically once they had broke them down and mind washed all these kids, they basically, the children, when they grew up, they basically became killing machines. And if you read the book, there's a couple of the commanders that are spoken about more often. You can, just the way they're described, and like one of them's 18, one of these commanders, and the way he's described is just like terrible and awful. Like they've done terrible things in such a short amount of their lifespan.
They've done terrible things because they were forced to, and then it just becomes a way of life. And then it becomes a matter of survival, and it's almost like they have been programmed and they can't break free of the cycle.
You see that example in his brother, Patrick, who eventually commits suicide after escaping.
Because he could no longer live a normal life.
So Patrick got mind washed. So he ran away and committed suicide because he didn't know what to do?
Actually, he lived in their original village for a while, but instead of being able to sleep in like a normal house on their sort of bed, he had been sleeping out in the African brush so much that he would sneak out and sleep out in the rough brush with all the thorns. And eventually he couldn't take it, so he committed suicide.
He couldn't take it because he was no longer a part of the society, and he no longer found a way to be a part of society.
You know, sometimes we talk about trauma usually we talk about trauma from people's childhoods, and we're not talking about like these young boys who are conscripted into these armies. We're talking about people who are abused in a home as a child, and they have this trauma that affects them for the rest of their lives. So they may not be comfortable in certain situations. You know, they may not be able to form relationships with certain adults, or whether it's males or females or something like that, because of the way they were treated. And I think that kind of what's his name, the older brother?
Patrick
probably had some type of trauma to where he could not go back into normal society. His brain was so
scarred
to where he could not see himself fitting back into going into a house and still living that kind of lifestyle, because whatever they did to break his spirit turned him into someone who was comfortable in the bushes, in the forest, and no longer with just normal society. All right, so to our listeners, okay, we don't want to leave people with this idea that, you know, just because this one thing is happening in a part of Africa, that this is the way things are in Africa. That just like we don't want people to think that when you see Black people being killed by a police officer in America, that it happens every day in every city, on every street in America. But to Nyasha's point, sometimes something like this will take us by surprise, because this is not what we expect. This is not what we expect, because really, when we look at ourselves, like in our family and the people that we know, in our community, we are a peace-loving people, most of us, whether we are Black or white. And you guys have the advantage of having Black and white in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
This is not all that we think of when we think about the world. Like, there's someone who's living a life like this. But I just wanted to put that out there.
I think it's important, though, to not close our eyes to the suffering of other people. So I think it's important to acknowledge when people suffer and not try to push it under a rug. And it's important to talk about it. And that's why someone listening may, if they know us, be like, yeah, but some of their kids, aren't they little? How come they're talking about this around the table with I guess they're 9 now. 9-year-old twins just had a birthday. But the truth of the matter is, it's important to be honest. It's also important to know what goes on in the world around us. And if there is something that we can do, we should do it. If we find in our path an organization that's rehabilitating child soldiers and we can support
Donate.
that organization, then you should do it. If it is someone across the street who is old and can't shovel their snow because they broke their hip, you should do it. If you know someone who is suffering and you can call them up and encourage them, even those little things, you should do it. So in every part of our lives, we need to acknowledge when we see things and not try to hide from it. We also need to try to make a difference.
Yeah, that way we don't wake up one day and look up and realize the world has been bending around us all along. And we just kept our heads.
And we've been just trying to be so safe and comfortable. We were afraid to notice.
Yeah, and to echo your mother's words, we have a podcast. We can talk about different issues and we can use our voices to talk about issues that affect the world that we live in. Again, our podcast is called Life Story, and these are the stories that shape the lives that we're living. So it's appropriate for us to be talking about this particular topic.
Do we do podcasts on Christmas? Like Christmas podcasts?
I don't know.
It's February.
No, like when it's Christmas, do we do
I don't know. We don't know.
We need to sign off so I can do the dishes.
I wanted to say we have no podcasts on Christmas.
Okay, we do need to sign off. Thank you, Nyasha, for your poem. I think it was eye-opening, definitely to me, and inspiring. I'll probably be reading better books from now on. I should probably read the books that you guys are reading. I have books that I read, but I need to start reading some of the stuff you're reading. It seems like you guys are learning a lot.
If I choose the library books.
Yeah.
If Makanaka chooses the library books.
It's another story.